Let's talk about mitochondria and chloroplasts. Mitochondria make ATP by extracting energy from food molecules, whereas chloroplasts capture solar energy. So it may at first sound like they do something very similar. But mitochondria actually convert that energy from food molecules into adenosine triphosphate or ATP. ATP is more readily usable than energy from food storage. Chloroplasts can actually make their own food energy. They do that by converting solar energy into sugar. But sugar is still not readily usable energy, so mitochondria then take that and convert it into ATP. So both mitochondria and chloroplasts work together to make sure that cells have everything they need to survive, grow, and reproduce. We want to make sure that cells are able to meet their needs. Mitochondria especially play a key role in converting energy in the form of food molecules or sugar into something readily usable, which is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. The process that takes place in a mitochondria is cellular respiration. That's the process that produces ATP. And ATP has two high energy terminal phosphate bonds that, when broken, release energy, which is what makes it readily usable in a cell. If we look at the basic structure of a mitochondria, you have an outer and inner membrane, and whereas the outer membrane is smooth, the inner membrane has deep folds called cristae. In between the two membranes, you have an intermembrane compartment, and a matrix is a space within the inner membrane. That space is filled with fluid. Most of the chemical reactions of cellular respiration happen in the matrix, but the rest occur on the cristae, or kind of as an interchange between the matrix and the intermembrane space. So here again is that structure. Mitochondria produce ATP, which is readily usable energy for a cell. They have two membranes. The inner membrane is folded. The inside of the inner membrane is called the matrix. And in between the two membranes, we have the intermembrane space. But what about chloroplasts? Well, they're the sites of photosynthesis. They can make their own sugar. Chloroplasts are organelles in which photosynthesis occurs. They also have a double membrane, but they have specialized structures within that inner membrane called thylakoid individually, and in a stack, they're called a grana. All of these stacks are found within a fluid called a stroma. Inside of a chloroplast, you have chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is actually found in the membranes of the thylakoids. And it's the chlorophyll that absorbs or captures sunlight and is able to convert or at least initiate the process of converting the energy of sunlight into other molecules to produce or synthesize sugar. We synthesize sugar from carbon dioxide and water, so the process of photosynthesis actually converts an inorganic carbon dioxide into something organic in the form of sugar that still contains carbon. So mitochondria and chloroplasts work well together, and both are found in plant cells and some protists. But animal cells just have mitochondria. So that's why they have to rely on absorbed nutrients. But if we're talking about where did they come from, we have to look to the endosymbiont theory, the endosymbiont hypothesis, where both mitochondria and chloroplasts evolved from prokaryotic bacteria about 1.7 billion years ago. They essentially took up residence within other cells, kind of early eukaryotes. So that process is endosymbiosis. And many of the characteristics of mitochondria and chloroplasts are similar to prokaryotes. They even have their own DNA. Here's that process. You can see just kind of the taking in of the mitochondria and the chloroplast by other cells. You would initially have a non-photosynthetic eukaryote take in mitochondria, and then we would take in the photosynthetic kind of early chloroplast, and that would allow for a photosynthetic eukaryote. We do know that during the endosymbiont theory, or during this process, it appears that mitochondria was engulfed before chloroplasts. But let's not also forget plastids. Plastids are like simple chloroplasts. They're still double layered, but they're just storage sites for things like pigments or food molecules. And they're only found in plants and photosynthetic protists. So here is a plastid, and it's just simply storing starch globules. But let's also not forget that cells have more than just these basic organelles. They have many membrane enclosed spaces, but they also need support and shape and ways to provide movement. And that is provided by the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is a dynamic network of protein fibers within the cytoplasm. We've actually already taken a quick look at them. They include the big, thick microtubules made up of different tubulin subunits. You have the intermediate filaments that are intermediate in size, and you have the microfilaments made up of actin proteins that resemble kind of a twisted double strand of beads. And the microfilaments, intermediate filaments, and thick microtubules, they are the three major types of cytoskeletal elements. And they contribute to several important functions like support and connection. Intermediate filaments and microfilaments provide support for cells. We also get things like shape and movement from cytoskeletal elements. Some cytoskeletal elements are able to act as railroad tracks for motor proteins. That includes both microfilaments and microtubules. Motor proteins are other proteins that kind of walk in a way powered by ATP, of course, along these railroad tracks, or essentially cytoskeletal strings. Movement is a big one for cytoskeletal proteins and their function. Animal cells move as microtubules and microfilaments extend by adding subunits to one end and releasing them from the other. This type of polymerization and then depolymerization is really important for amoeboid action of cells like a macrophage in the human body. And some cytoskeletal proteins may act as railroad tracks for motor proteins in order to move organelles across the cell. And actin microfilaments can be pulled by motor proteins as well as in muscle cells. But what's really important about cytoskeletal proteins is they contribute also to cell division, specifically microtubules and microfilaments. Microtubules guide chromosomes and their movement, whereas microfilaments pinch the dividing cell once the chromosomes have moved to opposite sides and actually separates that dividing cell into two separate cells called daughter cells. So that's just a little bit to the eukaryotic cytoplasm and its membranes and its compartmentalization. But these membranes collectively are called the endomembrane system. They're able to organize and segregate molecules and basically put order to these many biochemical processes that occur within the cell. The system we're calling the endomembrane system extends past the nuclear envelope and includes things like the endoplasmic reticulum, vesicles, the Golgi apparatus, and lysosomes. So we're going to look at those next.